Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Clint Gatewood, Vice President of Channel Development. Thank you for joining us, whether it's, good morning, good afternoon, good night, wherever you happen to be in the world. We do have representation from pretty much around the globe, as SASMAX has resellers in out over 92 countries, I think it is now. We're happy to have you here. We're going to give everyone just one more minute to join in. So please enjoy the silence for a moment, because once we get started, it'll be fast and furious with Kendra here today, and a lot of great information to share with you. So just hold on about 30 seconds and we will get started. All right, everyone. Good day, good afternoon, good night. Clint Gatewood, Vice President of Channels here at SASMAX. I'm happy to be hosting this afternoon with Kendra Lee and the KLL Group and get more customers now. Part of our Crossing the SASM series, you'll see these types of presentations coming out about once every month or every 45 days. So keep watch for them, providing more and more content to our channel members and the reseller channel in general. So we'll be bringing out much more content as we move forward with this. Today, I'm really happy to present Kendra Lee in our title here. It's 4 keys to hire great sales reps and get results. Kendra Lee is our presenter today, and I'm happy to have gotten to know her. She is the president and founder of KLA Group. She's a top 50, one of the top 50 channel influencers, mentioned by Vargai, and one of the top 10 women in sales that you would want to follow. So you should also follow her on Twitter. Here's her information right here. She has a lot of information to impart to you, and I'm going to turn it over to Kendra. So Kendra, do you want to say hello and maybe introduce yourself a bit more as we move on?
Well, thank you, Clint, and hello, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be with you here today. As Clint said, I'm president and founder of KLA Group. Our organization works with channel partners who are between the size of $750,000 in annual revenue up to $1 million in annual revenue to get more customers. And one of the ways that you can do that is through hiring. And so we today are going to talk about the 4 keys that you can use to hire great sales reps and get them onboarded to bring them up to full productivity. Clint, do we want to change slides or say anything about questions as we go?
Yes, we can. So I've already changed the slides. Hopefully they're running faster. I'm a little slow on my internet here today. But if you have questions, please type them in. I did forget to mention that everyone is on mute today. We are recording this presentation for later use. So please, if you have questions, don't forget to type them in in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen there. Type in your questions, anything you have. The only stupid question I know of is a question that goes unanswered because you didn't ask it. So if you're thinking of a question, I'm sure there's other people in the audience today that have the same question, or I might even have the same question. So please type your questions in. If it's very relevant to the material we're covering at that point in time, I may pause Kendra and we will take those questions as we go. If not, we will answer them towards the end. So again, please type in your questions. And back to Kendra.
Perfect. All right. So Clint, I can't see the slides, so I'm just going to let you know when you should turn them. We should, oh, there we go. Look at that. Magic. I love it. All right. So as I mentioned, there are 4 keys when you are hiring sales reps that you want to keep in mind. The first one is knowing what the role is that you should hire. And as we look at the next slide, you'll see that there are 4 different job roles in sales. You may have lots of different titles that you're using, but the reality is they all break down into 4 primary roles. So you've got your appointment setter. Sometimes you'll hear referred to as a telemarketer. Their primary job is setting appointments. The second is inside sales, which an appointment setter can often be called inside sales as well. I think the primary difference that I see between inside sales and just appointment setting is that they often have a closing responsibility. And they're called inside sales because all or the majority of their job is done over the phone. Don't mistake them for not being able to sell well. It just means that they are selling over the phone. Then there is outside sales, where the majority of their job is done where they go out to meet with clients. And here, think new business development. You can think account management, and they could be titled an account manager or a new business development manager or even a hunter. Okay, but they're mostly going outside. And then the fourth role that a lot of times you don't think about is actually sales operations. Sometimes you'll hear that people have said, oh, I've hired a sales associate, or I have a sales operations person. Here, their job is primarily operational in nature. They may be doing quotes for you. They could be calling to follow up on some quotes if you've got that being done in operations instead of inside sales. They have more of a semi-customer facing role because really they're supporting sales. So these are the 4 different job roles that you can hire. And you really want to think about, well, what is the job that I need before you just post your job description. And then on the next slide, what I've done is I've said, man, you really need to know what is the organization, the sales organization that I want to set up. So I've got all those 4 job roles that you could have, but do you want to hire all of them, or do you only hire one of them? And when you're starting to build your sales organization or you're looking at expanding it, you want to have a good vision of what an organization could potentially look like. So what I did here is just outlined, this is what a larger sales organization could evolve to. And what you see is we've got outside sales that could be made up of hunters and account managers. You've got the appointment setter, sales operations, and then technical sales support. Now, if you had inside sales, then that would take the place of where the appointment setter is. Notice that I've got marketing in the upper right-hand corner, but I really haven't attached it to anything. Marketing sometimes reports in to sales, so you actually would have a sales and marketing manager, but it's interfacing, working with sales, so we don't want to forget it. Once you have this vision, you can start thinking about, well, what's the right role that I need to have in place? It's really interesting. Most of the clients that we work with on the hiring side, where we're helping them define their hiring process and determine what the right role is to hire, when they come to us, the first thing they say is, Kendra, we need a hunter. It's like, okay, yeah, we need more leads. Yep, we need more business coming in the door. We need a hunter. We need somebody who's going to go out there and find that new business and slay it. And we'll get underneath it, and a lot of times we'll discover, actually, they want somebody who's going to go find new opportunities, but then let them or one of their team members come in and work it and close it. I can't tell you how many times I'll hear, oh, we're really good at closing an opportunity once we get it, or we're really good at working an opportunity once it comes in the door and it's qualified. Well, finding it and qualifying it is one of the hardest pieces. Closing it once it's qualified, if you've got a good service and a reasonable competitive price, is the easy part. So your salespeople, that person that's doing your new business development, is a critical cog. So you have to think about, what do I really want them to do? That situation I described to you where they said, oh, just come in and, find us those opportunities. Well, that could happen in marketing, or that could be your appointment setter. Your hunter is typically expected to find the opportunity, work it, and close it. So you want to be thinking about what do I really need? I've also heard situations where people have said, oh man, we just can't get to doing all the quotes. Nice problem to have, right? So how can we get to do our quotes? We can work the opportunities. We even get a lot of referrals. We can't call all the people to follow up on opportunities, to follow up on the quotes that we've given them. I hear this a lot if you're doing maintenance renewal, or you're doing quarterly business reviews. So then what you may need is somebody who's in sales operations. So really diagnose what is that role that you need. And then as you're doing your hiring, you have this organizational vision in place, and you want to know, where are we going from there? We want to be able to show a candidate what their opportunity is, what their growth path is. And so on the next slide, you can see the growth path within your organization. Back one, there you go. And if you look at this, what I've done is I've put in lines to show you how each role can move up in your organization. Once you find a really good salesperson, the last thing you want to do is lose them. Let's say you find a great appointment setter. You don't want to lose your appointment setter because they get burned out. You don't want to lose your technical sales support person because they don't want to stay in technical sales support anymore, or your sales operations person because they're tired of doing proposals and support work. So you want to be able to show candidates and your team what's the opportunity as your company grows. And so here you can see technical sales support and sales operations could move into account management. Appointment setters could become hunters, or they could move into marketing. Outside sales, your hunters or your account managers may be able to move into sales management. So now, even though you may only have one salesperson today, or be hiring your first one, or you're hiring your 10th, you have a vision that can show them where they can grow as the company grows. And here's something for you to think about. This is sales. Sales is what makes your company grow. And so if they want to move into a new position, it is absolutely in their control to make that happen, because they're in the organization that drives the revenue within your business. It's not like with techs where you have to say, hey, wait until we sell more and we need a service manager position. Instead, it's like, go sell more and we're going to have to hire more people, and then we can move you up. So this is how you offer a growth path to anybody that you're hiring. Now, as we discuss the role with somebody that we're hiring, we also want to be able to talk about the expectations for a sales rep, which I have on the next slide. When you are hiring a salesperson, the first thing you want to look at is their experience. It's not enough that they have sold for another company. They have to have sold in a way that you know they're going to be successful selling for you. So you want to be looking for 3 specific areas of experience. The first one is their solutions experience. And so 2 questions to ask yourself are, have they sold IT before, or are you going to have to educate them on IT, which can be done, but you need to know that, and you need to know if there's some aptitude, they've done something that would show that they could grasp IT. And then you also want to know, have they achieved their quota or a target in the past. If they've sold IT, it's easier for you to see if they'll be able to be successful selling for you based on what they've done in the past. So you want to ask. One candidate that I interviewed for a client recently had said, oh yeah, I do $1 million deals all the time. And when I asked him, okay, so what was your quota last year? He said, oh, my quota last year was 1.5 million. I said, great, that sounds excellent. How did you do against your quota? Oh, I sold 300,000, but I've got a lot in my pipeline. Okay, so let me get this straight. You sold 1.5, or your quota was 1.5 million, but you sold 300,000. So you missed your quota, is what you're telling me. And he's like, yes, but we've got a lot in the pipeline and our sales cycle is long. Okay, red flag. Yes, they can always find an excuse for you, because guess what their job is? It's selling. But we really want to delve in and fully understand the situation. Okay, so the first thing you want to know is solutions. The second thing you want to know about is the vertical industries and their audience, which if you click, you'll see that one come up with 2 questions that you need to answer here. There we go. So with the vertical industries and their audience, here what we want to know is who have they sold to, and have they sold to the type of people that you sell to? Oftentimes, I'll have somebody come and they'll say, oh, I've got a great candidate. They used to work for Microsoft. Or, oh, I've got this great candidate. They worked for our unified communications provider. It's like, okay, so they worked for an enterprise company. That doesn't necessarily make them a good candidate. It means they understand IT, yay, but are they used to working for a company our size? And then, are they used to calling on the level and the title that you normally sell to? Many of our clients target companies that are anywhere from 20 employees up to 500 employees. We have others that go up to 1,000. But if you think about the 20 to say 100, 150, 250 market, you're selling to a business owner or a COO or a CFO. And if that candidate is not comfortable talking at that C level, then they're not going to be very successful for you. They're going to try and sell to the office manager, who for a follow-on sale might be a great person to talk to, but in the beginning is not going to be successful. Won't get them in the door if you're trying to do new business development. So we really want to understand what are the vertical industries and the audience that they've sold to in the past. Then, who are the companies they sold to? Talked about that. We really don't want the Microsoft and other vendor, their staff, unless they have had another job, is what I usually say. And the other thing to think about that I've got on the slide here is if they've sold for a really large company, there are certain processes, tools, and resources that a sales rep is going to be accustomed to using. That's not to say that you couldn't hire them, but if you, for example, don't have anything that's a resource that outlines your solutions. So oftentimes we'll create an infographic that outlines all the different solutions so that a sales rep can use it in their selling. If you don't have something like that, then your sales rep has to be able to walk in with a pad of paper or a whiteboard or just the old-fashioned napkin and be able to talk about your solutions. If they're accustomed to having a bunch of glossy brochures and lots of content on your website and you don't have that, then it's going to be harder for them to sell. If you don't have a defined sales process and they are accustomed to following a very specific sales process that the company has given them, it's going to be harder for them. So this is critical experience that you want to question for when you are interviewing a candidate, and you're questioning for it specific to that role that we just talked about. Then for the expectations on the next slide, actually, I think I'm going to talk about compensation next. Let's talk about compensation. There we go. So for our role, I'll talk about expectations in a minute. I got ahead of myself because I really like expectations. We don't hold our reps accountable enough, so I wanted to jump. When you are interviewing, you also have to know what is the compensation plan that you're going to use. And if you're going to hire and onboard and get results from your salespeople, you have to be compensating them from the way that will motivate them to do what you want. And we could do a whole webinar just on compensation, but I just want to share with you a couple of compensation plan thoughts that you want to keep in mind. For a sales rep, you want to be thinking about the contract length, the target contract or deal value that you want your reps to be selling, what the minimum amount is that you want them to sell, and then what you'll do if they actually overachieve, which is our goal. We love all of our salespeople to overachieve. So how are we going to reward them? And finally, what is the level of complexity that your system can manage? I can give you, I have a great story of one of our favorite clients that we have worked with is very analytical and in many ways is a math genius. He built a compensation plan that, no joke, had more than 25 elements that, based on where somebody was against their quota at any point in time during the year, based on the margin that they had sold for, so the discount, and what it was they specifically sold to which region, it calculated their compensation. Only he could understand that. And it had to all be done manually in an Excel spreadsheet. It was a lot of work. It was very hard for them to grow. So these are the key elements you want to think about. And if I go back from a contract length perspective, you're thinking about if it's a recurring revenue contract, is this a 3-year contract? Is it a 1-year contract? If it's a project, how difficult is it going to be to get that next sale? So for a recurring revenue, how difficult is it going to be to get a client to sign up again or to renew the contract? If it's a project, how difficult is it going to be to get the next follow-on sale? The more difficult it is, the higher you want to compensate, because you want a rep to be very focused on making that next sale happen. Okay. For your target contract or deal value, you want to be thinking about, well, what do I want them to sell? If it's a recurring revenue contract, what's the minimum I want them to sell? Maybe I don't compensate below that. If it's a project, what's the minimum I want them to sell there? What types of projects do I want them to sell? So be thinking about that value both at the upper end and the lower end. And if they exceed or overachieve, what are we going to give them? Is there some type of incentive to make those overachieving salespeople really go for that extra $200,000 or $50,000 or $5,000, whatever it may be based on how you're selling. If you look at the next slide, I've given you some things to think about for appointment setters. We have a number of clients that like to do appointment setting. Your number one challenge in appointment setting is the quality of the appointments. Are they setting good appointments, or are we just compensating them to make appointments? So what we really want to do is to compensate them not for setting the appointment, but make it for the quality of the appointment, either based on the type of person that you've met with, or did we get a second appointment? But think beyond just setting one appointment. The biggest mistake they make, if you click, you'll see this one come up, is pay based on the number of appointments that are set. If you're paying based on that, there's nothing that is incenting your appointment setter to qualify the appointment before they set it. And you'll know there's a problem if you're going out on a lot of appointments that really don't have value or don't convert to a second appointment. So those are some considerations for your compensation, whether it's a sales rep or an appointment setter type of role. Now, let's talk about, on the next slide,
yes, and just as we move on, Kendra, just wanted to break in real quick. Sorry to break the flow, but remember to put your questions in. Remember to put your questions in. We got several questions now, but keep putting your questions in, and we'll go from there.
Put your questions in and go to the next slide, and why don't we take some? Because the next slide is self-explanatory. We want to keep your reps hungry. Okay, what questions do we have, Clint?
Okay, let's get to a couple of them, and I think I switched the slides again. Boy, this thing's just changing crazily on me here.
It's flying through.
Yeah. All right, so going fast. So one of the questions that we have are, what are the type of productivity tools do sales consultants and sales advisors need to be more effective?
I think the number one tool that you want to have to be effective is a CRM. And whether your CRM is part of a software package like a PSA or it's its own, your reps have to have a way that they can keep track of where they are in their activities. And you, as the business owner or the sales manager, have to be able to track the reps' activities that they're doing. Because in our next section, I'm going to talk about setting expectations. It's critical that you are monitoring their results and you're holding reps accountable for those. So it serves two purposes using your CRM. They get to track what they're doing and you get to see what they're doing. And if you're doing any type of lead generation, hopefully they can have visibility into what you're doing into any companies that are in your CRM.
Great, excellent. Yeah, CRMs are very, very important to that whole piece, and being able to track them as well as giving them the tools that they need to keep on top of their opportunities. So, excuse me. One more question here, and then we'll move on. You showed an org chart of the different types and what a sales organization looks like. Is there a certain revenue point that you really see companies moving more into sales managers, or adding more sales reps? Is there where I build my org chart? So where do I start? Typically.
That's a really good question. My rule of thumb is when you have at least 3 sales reps, more like 5 sales reps, then you can add a sales manager. The exception, I would say, to that is we work with a lot of business owners who just feel lost when they're working with sales. And so they'll want to put that sales manager role in place. The challenge is if that manager is just a manager, then you could be paying a lot of overhead for them to manage a few people. So then you might put a working sales manager in place, meaning they have a territory and some management responsibilities. But my rule of thumb is no less than 3, more like by the time they get to 5.
Okay, great. And let's now that we know how many salespeople we want to have, let's keep them hungry.
Let's keep them hungry with a compensation plan where we're not overpaying on our base. I can tell you many stories of people who have paid 70 or 80 or 90 or $100,000 base salaries, and their reps are perfectly happy to live on that base salary without much incremental commission. Of course, it depends on where you live in the country, but be very careful that your compensation plan isn't making them comfortable. Keep them hungry. So let's go to the next slide. And as we're doing that, on tools for salespeople, I just want to add one thing. There are many. I could have mentioned LinkedIn Navigator. I could mention things like Zoom Info for lists or data.com. I mean, there's so many tools that can help reps be productive. The first key is making sure they're using your CRM, which is why I answered that way. All right. Setting measurable performance expectations is your second key to getting the results that you want. And if you look at the next slide, I recommend, and why don't you go ahead and just click through till you get all the way to one more. There you go. Okay, so I look at expectations over 30, 60, 90 days, 6 months, and a year for a new hire salesperson. The reality is it is going to take you anywhere from a year to 18 months to 2 years to bring an outside sales rep to full productivity. It's a fact. Just is. You want to be prepared for that when you hire them. That does not mean that you have to wait 18 months or 2 years to find out if a sales rep is going to work out. Instead, what you're going to do is set performance expectations throughout that time period and then monitor them to determine, is the sales rep making progress? And here what I've done is I've shown you what are the expectations, areas that you should set over that first year. The length of time that it will take for your salesperson to come up to full productivity is based on the sell cycle of your solution, as well as how well known you are in your market. If you are selling, say, software application development, let's say custom software application development, then that could be a very long sell cycle. We have one client that they do all big data mining, and it's all custom. Their sell cycles are anywhere from a year to 2 years, sometimes 3 years, and they're selling them to enterprises, to the CIO, or to their application development teams. So for them, for a rep to come to full productivity, it is going to take them 18 months to 2 years, just because of the complexity. Contrast that to our managed services clients that are selling IT managed services. They have anywhere from a 60 to 90-day sales cycle, realistically, from the time that they find a new opportunity to the time that they close it. So they've cold called or done lead generation and followed up on a marketing qualified lead all the way through closure. It's usually 60 to 120 days. those sales reps tend to come up to speed, believe it or not, about a year, sometimes 18 months, even with a sales cycle that short. The way that you can shorten your onboarding time is through your training, which I'll talk about in a couple minutes, but also by hiring somebody who's more experienced, which we just talked about. But still, even if they come with that experience, they need to learn about your company, and it takes some time. So if you go to the next slide, I've overlaid a bell curve on top of this to show you hunter expectations. As I said, so many of our clients look to hire hunters, and when we work with them and we're setting performance expectations, what we're showing them here is that you can expect that they will spend the majority of their time calling and doing prospecting in their second and their third month. In their first month, they're doing a lot of training. And in the fourth month, or by 6 months, they should at that point have reached a point where they have started filling their pipeline with new opportunities. So they have less time for prospecting. So when you're setting expectations, you're going to set higher expectations at 60 days and 90 days for the number of calls that they're making, and then have it decrease when they get to 6 months and a year. Okay. And by the way, purple box at the bottom, you absolutely want to set quotas and goals for all your sales reps. If you look at the next slide, we talked about tools that will help the productivity of a salesperson. I recommend that you automate your hiring process. That's a tool that will help you as the business owner / sales manager. We use a tool called Workable, where we're able to automate it. It sends out the job description to all the different job boards. It then has the application automated. It sifts through all of the candidates that come in based on the settings that you put in place to identify who are the candidates that you should interview. We have found it to be very time-saving for the clients that use it, and we use it ourselves. It's not an ad for them. I'm just saying automate your hiring process. It will make it much easier for you. All right, so now our third key to success, and then I'll take questions again after that, I've already started to talk about on the next slide, and that's establishing an onboarding plan. It's actually your onboarding plan that frequently causes you to have hired a very skilled person, but then have that person fail. If you don't have an onboarding plan, then that skilled person is unable to translate their current skills into how to be effective working for your company. Your unskilled new hires, they're going to fail whether you have an onboarding plan or not, and you're going to see that happen really quickly. The ones that will surprise you are the people that you say, oh my gosh, they were really successful at other companies. They made their numbers. Why are they not successful for us? It's usually because of your onboarding. On the next slide, I've outlined the 4 key areas that you should highlight with your onboarding plan. So you want your plan to include all of these. The first one is process. So what are you selling? Who are you selling it to? How is it that you sell it? And then if you click, the next one is products. And then that's what you're selling. What order do you sell it in? What's your sales funnel look like? The first thing you sell, the second thing you sell, the third thing you typically sell. Who have you sold it to? Why do they care? And the third thing are your systems, which we talked about. Which ones do you use? What do we use for CRM? What do we use for quoting? Where do you go to find information about our solutions? And then the fourth is practicing. So you practice with them and they practice on their own doing their selling. So this means things like role play or giving them activities to talk with clients. But you want to have a solid onboarding plan in place for your salespeople so that they can come in and take the skills they already have and apply it to selling for your company. On the next slide, you'll see I say that experience does not supersede training. One client that we had said, oh yeah, we don't need an onboarding plan. He said, we're hiring this really experienced salesperson. He has sold for the last 10 years. In this case, it was a managed service provider. And he said, oh yeah, they've sold managed services. And in fact, this guy actually owned a managed services company. So I don't think we're going to need to do any training for him. Well, he came on board, and after the first 2 months, he really didn't have any opportunities in his pipeline. And we're sitting there looking at it, and my client is going, well, I don't understand. He's been really successful. Why hasn't he got anything going? I've heard him making phone calls. I know he's going out on appointments, so he's doing stuff. Why is this not working? Well, when we got underneath it, it was because he didn't fully understand what their solution set was. And so he wasn't comfortable having conversations with prospects that he had uncovered about the solutions because they were just different enough from what he had sold in the past that he didn't really know how to talk about it for this new company. So what they did is they went back in and actually retrained him on what their solutions are and how they position them in the market, who it is they sell it to. And now he was more comfortable with how to talk about it. And within the next month, he'd taken the opportunities, the conversations he'd had with other people, and turned them into real sales opportunities in the pipeline. So it was just a matter of he didn't understand how to position what they were selling. So your onboarding plan is critical, whether you're hiring a very experienced person or not. The difference comes down to how long you need to spend doing the training. But you absolutely have to take them through it so that they have heard from you, your process, your systems, your solutions, and now they can apply it using what they already know. Now let's take a moment and stop and see, do we have any more questions, Clint?
For most of the questions we have here, I think you've already answered from that standpoint. So a lot of them were on, lead times and how ramp times and those types of pieces. So I think you've covered that here. So again, I'm gonna remind you, if you keep coming up with questions, please ask them. We're moving through the hour pretty quickly, so we got about 15 minutes left. So if you have questions that you want to ask Kendra, take advantage of her time today and ask your questions. So we shall proceed.
Excellent. All right. So our fourth key to success is leading and managing your salespeople. And depending on the size of your organization, this is where I would say we see most companies fall down. And it happens most frequently because whoever has the sales manager responsibility, whether it's the owner, the COO, the CFO or a sales manager isn't confident in their own sales abilities. And so they tend to leave it to the sales people, or they expect that the sales team is going to be intrinsically motivated by the compensation plan and doesn't need that level of leadership. So leading and managing your team is critical. You would never tell your consultants, your technical staff, or your anyone on your operations side, go ahead, just do your job, and never look at them again. You probably have all sorts of processes in place. You have metrics that you're monitoring. You're probably looking at how they are performing. And if you see anything that's out of alignment with your expectations, you bring it up. Sales is exactly the same way. It's another process. It has very definite metrics that your sales team should be performing against, and you have to lead and manage your sales team. So if you look at the next slide, your leadership and your management actually starts during the interview process. That's where your reps hear you talking about, first, what's most important to you. Second, what your expectations are for whoever has that role. And third, what you have in place to support them. So they start hearing your leadership and your management all the way back in the interview process. And then you want to follow it through. Now, what I've done on this slide is I've outlined what are the minimum success tools, I call them, that you have to have in place when you're hiring a salesperson. And I've looked at it hiring or starting a sales team. So maybe you're hiring your very first salesperson versus growing an existing team. You do not have to have everything in place when you hire your very first or second salesperson that you may have when you grow an existing sales team. So at a minimum, when you're starting a sales team, you want to have those performance expectations in place that we talked about. You want every member of your sales team to have an objective, either a quota or an activity objective. You want a defined sales process, even if it's a simple one that covers the 5 or 6 steps of a common sales process, but you want to have one in place. A sales toolkit that includes what's the messaging. When I opened, I was able to tell you that our organization focuses on how you can get more customers. I didn't complete it by saying we work with clients in lead generation, prospecting, and hiring. And I also told you we work with companies that are between $750,000 in annual revenue up to $85 million. You want them to know their message. How do they describe your company? And then when they're talking with people, either prospecting or when they're doing account management, they know what their message is for the business issue that they're talking about. So they have to have the message that includes the value proposition, the mission, the vision of your company, the value of working with your company. They have to know what that is. And testimonials or case studies. 1 or 2 is fine. 10, 20, more, even better. But 1 or 2 is fine. They need a few. And you have to have some content on your website. So you've got the website itself, and then let's Let's put some blog content out there that reinforces your value and your solutions. So not just generic content, but content specific to the company. The CRM we've talked about, accountability reporting comes from your CRM. And then you do have to conduct weekly sales meetings. Can't get out of that. If you have an existing team that you're growing, when you click, that one will come up. Here, you want to have all the tools from starting a sales team, and now you want to add an account management process, marketing campaign support that's nurturing and driving new marketing qualified leads for following up. And then you can add to your sales toolkit. So you may have a PowerPoint presentation they could use. You may have brochures or an infographic like I talked about, and then case studies by industry. So you don't have to have a lot in place to get started, but these are the tools that will help your rep be successful. Then on the next slide, your sales reps must have consistent leadership and accountability. Don't assume that because they have a job that takes them out of the office all the time, that they should work independently. Okay? They need that support and leadership from you. You have to be monitoring what they're doing so that it keeps them on track. So if you go to the next slide, we've talked about the 4 keys to hiring and getting great results. The first one being that you know what role it is you're hiring. The second is that you're setting expectations and you're holding people to them. The third is training your salespeople so that they can apply the knowledge and skills they already have to your company. And then the fourth is that you are going to lead and manage them. If you do these 4 things, one of 2 things is going to happen. Either the poor performers are going to self-identify and you can get rid of them, or they're going to be successful because you are leading and managing them, and you hired the right role, you set the performance expectations, and you are monitoring them, and you have trained them. Okay, so that's how it all comes together. On the next slide, I've put together a free resource for you, and then I'm going to take questions again. So if you haven't put your question in, now is the time to do that.
Yeah, some great resources coming here, folks. So get your questions in. Don't forget. So just going to reiterate that piece.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So one of the biggest challenges is in interviewing and being able to uncover who is the sales rep that really can sell versus the sales rep that can sell you. And what we've put together for that we use with our clients is our top 10 interview questions guide. These are the top 10 questions that you should ask whenever you are interviewing someone for a sales position. And I've included in it questions for both hunters as well as account managers. And the hunter questions you can use for salespeople or for appointment setters as well. But these will help you to uncover their weaknesses and determine if you have the right candidate that you're looking for. And it's free. Just use that link that you see at the bottom. Now, let's take your questions. What other questions do we have, Clint?
Okay, so let's see here. Again, type in your questions and let's get things moving. So, when should we talked about the different type of salespeople to bring on, like in the org chart and stuff. What are the biggest difference between should I hire a hunter or should I bring in an account manager? What are the differences there?
I would say the biggest difference comes in to what what do you want this person doing? So the hunter role is all about new business development. We want them going out and finding new opportunities. We also want them finding or following up on marketing qualified leads that you may be generating through your lead generation. They may be following up on Google AdWords leads. So if you need somebody who is going to go ferret out and follow up on the new business opportunities, that would be a hunter role. If you have a lot of clients and you're finding that you can't support them all the way you want, or you're elevating how you're supporting your clients, that's where the account manager role comes into play. If you have clients that could do a lot more with you, but aren't, so there are more projects to be had, or they're growing and they need more sales support, that's when you'd hire an account manager.
Okay, great. And then you work with a lot of different resellers out there. You work anywhere, I think you said, from 750,000, upwards, even into big multi-million-dollar companies. So
no, 85 million. 85
up to
million
85
is our
million.
top.
Right. But when you work with the smaller, say, managed service providers or other types of solution providers out there, the ones that are at 750 to 1.5 million or so, in that, where they're getting to that stage that they really need to take a look at their business up to 1.52 million, they really need to be adjusting. And as they're coming towards that, what do you typically find from your experience is the first position they go? I mean, because I know that from my experience with those folks, is the owner is really the best sales guy. He's the one who can relate to the small business people. So what should he bring in first?
So typically it's owner-led selling. And I would say probably 80% of our clients are in that I have 0 sales reps up to I've only got 3 sales reps area. So I know this one well. They tend to be owner-led, and there are 2 roles that you might consider first. Some go the appointment setter route, setting appointments for the owner to then follow up on. Others hire an outside salesperson who primarily will have hunting responsibilities. So then both the owner and the new sales rep will be doing selling. And the decision between the 2 often comes down to the owner's time and the owner's own personal skills. At some point, you have to make the jump to hiring your own salesperson.
Mm-hmm. So let's say I really don't want to hire that first salesperson, but I need someone to set appointments for me. So I don't necessarily want to bring them in house. I want to hire another firm to do that for me, setting appointments for me. How have you seen that work in the marketplace, and what are the gotchas that I should be watching for if I'm going to do that?
I'm very passionate on this topic in that I don't believe you have a true business if you can't sell your solutions. And so I believe that sales needs to be in-house and not outsourced. It's so critical that you be able to sell. What I find is someone who works for you will be much more effective at setting appointments than an outside firm because they understand your organization, because they're part of it. So I actually recommend against outsourced appointment setting. But if you have suggestions, feel free to share them because I'm pretty passionate against it.
I kind of fall with you on that. So who best?
We just haven't seen it be. We have not seen it be successful, nor have we seen outsourced sales management be successful. You've got to figure it out. You've got to figure it out.
And then one last question, then we'll get going. So, well, you say it takes 6 months for a sales rep to get comfortable and start closing. That seems like a long time to invest in order to find out if the person is going to be successful. Are there any important indicators along the way to know if the rep is worth keeping or cutting before you lose too much time and expense?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's why we put those performance expectations in place, because from the very beginning, when they go on the phones and they start making calls, or they're working with clients, depending on if they're a hunter or a farmer, you are going to monitor their activities, and you should see them making their activity numbers. And when you set the performance expectations, you're going to set them from the perspective of, this is a brand new sales rep. And so in month one, I may expect that they can only set so many appointments, or they'll only go to so many meetings, or they'll make so many calls. And then I may see that number increase. That's where I showed the bell curve. I'll see them increase in the next month and increase in the month after that. We should see new opportunities coming into the pipeline. So there are absolutely metrics that you're going to monitor, all related to their activities. And if they're not making their activity metrics, then you'll cut them loose without waiting to see if they could sell.
Yep, exactly. And we are running out.
Passionate about that too.
I am too. Yes, absolutely. And if you're on the line and you're looking at hiring your first salesperson, I'm right with Kendra True as well. As you want a CRM, but not just a CRM. You want more of a sales system. A lot of the CRMs that I've seen don't track funnels very well, and they're more on the contact people. So you really need a strong sales system so you can see that activity at a click of a button and not have to be sitting down with spreadsheets. You just cannot effectively manage a salesperson off of spreadsheets. It does not work. I promise you. I've managed 20, 30 people at once. And even when I was only managing one person, you cannot effectively do it. So if you're going to make the investment and you're going to put a person on, make sure you invest, if nothing else, into a strong sales system, not just a CRM.
Yes, that's exactly right. Yes. And that's where the leading and the managing comes into play, right? Because now you've got them inputting it so that you can track it and you're paying attention to those numbers. You don't want to wake up, as one company that I talked to did, 10 months in, and say, oh, I should have been monitoring their metrics. If I had, I would have seen back in month 3 they weren't doing a very good job. Bad mistake.
So good. That's going to end today. And Kendra, I really appreciate it. It's been a fantastic presentation. It's great having you here. Here's Kendra's contact information at the end. You can reach out to SASMax as well if you're looking to get in touch with Kendra, or if you're looking for different solutions and different ways that SASMax can continue to help you, reach out to us, and we'll be in touch with all of you today. So Kendra, once again, thank you. And I do want to thank a member of our group who has been affected by the hurricane today, Laura Stewart, who is our basically our director of online content, which has brought this all to fruition. And unfortunately, she couldn't moderate today. That's why you get to hear my boring voice on the whole piece today and not the exciting Laura Stewart. So I want to thank her out there really quickly as well. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day.